Morning, everyone. Welcome back. I'd like to continue chapter 42 with you. We did verses 1 through 4 last time with God's appointing of his servant and the servant's teaching ministry and the gentleness with which the servant will go about that ministry. Starting in verse 5, God sets the ministry of his chosen servant in a much larger context, even a cosmic context. So let me pronounce some of these verses, and we'll translate them and consider them together. Starting in verse 5, Ko amar ha'el Adonai, borei hashamayim venotehem, roka ha'aretz, vet ze'eha, notein neshama la'am aleha, veruach laho lekim ba. Ani Adonai kerati ka betzedek, ve'achzek beyadeka, ve'etzar ka, ve'eten ka, livrit am leor goyim. Now, I'd like to read more than just that, but I think that's enough for pronouncing. Please pause the video, practice saying this Hebrew out loud, and see how much you can translate. Okay, starting in verse 5. Ko amar ha'el Adonai. Literally, thus says Yahweh the God. If you look up, often God is just called Elohim without the definite article. Sometimes you get Ha-Elohim, and sometimes Ha-El. Chris Wright, in his wonderful book, The Mission of God, he says that this is a way of saying God is unique, and that's actually one of the accepted uses of the definite article in biblical Hebrew. It's a way of saying the only God, the God, and there is no other, which is very appropriate for Isaiah 40 to 55 in this passage in particular. For this says the God, Yahweh, and then we get two cow active masculine singular participles. Sorry about that. A little hair fell on my screen. It was annoying me. Apologies. Okay, so Borei, obviously creating, Shemayim, the heavens, and then we have Nata, which means to stretch out, like a tent. It's one of those interesting temple connections. This is the same verb you use with a tent, or the tabernacle, something like that. Creating the heavens and stretching them out. And then Rakah means to stamp out or beat out or spread out. Rokah, sorry. So spreading out the earth. And then this noun is from the verb yatzah, to send out. So it means something, it means what the earth sends out, or its produce. So spreading out the earth and what comes out of her, referring back to Aretz. Then another participle, notain, giving, neshama, breath, to the people upon it, and then the parallel term ruach to those walking on it, and a cow masculine plural absolute participle. So let me change colors here. In the first line, God structures the cosmos. In the second line, God vivifies the cosmos. He breathes life into it. It's interesting, we get singular for every people, every race on the face of the planet. God structures the cosmos and makes it alive. And that is the larger context too. I, Yahweh, have called you. That is, my servant, from verse 1. God's work in all creation is the larger context for the mission of his people in the world. That is really interesting. Notice it's a perfect verb, so probably past tense, I have called you. And not just any calling, it's done in righteousness. And it's a noun form, but it's used adverbially. It's not brute power. It's a morally upright thing to do. Then, achzek beyadeka, so chazak with a 1cs imperfect, and I have grasped you by the hand. This is a hiphil because of the a vowel and the I vowel. If you look up chazak with yad elsewhere, it does mean literally to take someone by the hand, to hold their hand. It can also mean to strengthen the hand. You get the same phrase in Isaiah 35 verse 3, I think. You get it repeatedly in Nehemiah for encouraging people. And both of those senses coalesce nicely with the thought of God holding you by the hand. The next verb is natsar, which means, and the nun has assimilated to the tzadeh, it means to guard or watch or keep. I've guarded you, I've watched you. and I have natanned you, I've given you. So before we talk about the last clause, notice we get 3 imperfect verbs after the perfect. And notice they are not consecutive imperfect, they're just the simple vav imperfect. If they were consecutive imperfect, it would be easier to say, I've called you, I have seized you, I've guarded you, I've given you. With the simple vav, I think all that does is to say, this action comes after that. I think it's best to translate as present or future as a result. So I have called you, and I grasp you by the hand, I guard you, I give you, or I will guard you, I will give you. Take your pick. Then we get this very interesting, significant phrase. God gives his servant, his people, as a covenant to the people, as a light to the nation. I assume the am here is the same am back there. So this is an objective genitive, and you check Wilkie O'Connor, one species of the genitive is of an objective genitive is a genitive of advantage. So a covenant for the advantage of the a covenant for the benefit of the people. And this is spelled out as light for the goyim, for the nations. So and goyim are the same. And how will the nations benefit? Well, it will be or. It will be light. And I think we're supposed to be thinking of verse 4 in the background here. So that's why God calls, that's why God strengthens, why he guards. And, excuse me, I dropped my pen. And he gives. He gives his own people. And interestingly, normally covenants are, they're not people, they're agreements between people. But in Isaiah 42, God covenants in the form of his servant with the whole world, and especially in the form of his Son. Verse 7, really quickly, I didn't pronounce it out loud, but let's just do verse 7. I think we'll call it quits for today. The lamed prefix on the infinitive construct shows the purpose. So verse 5, God's larger action in creation as the larger context funneling into what he does for his servant, and then verse 7, the purpose, lif koach, to open aniyim eyes, ivrot, blind, to open blind eyes. That's helps us make sense out of the or in the previous verse. And not only that, lehotzi, to send forth, so this is the hiphil of yatzah, to cause to go out, to send forth, sagar mimasger asir. So an asir is a prisoner, and sagar is a verb, means to shut up. So the prisoner from the prison house, and from the Beit Kele, that's where Joseph gets thrown in Genesis. From the prison house, the one dwelling in darkness. So some commentators, when they read verse 7, say, is this Cyrus that he's talking about? I don't think this is talking about political liberation, because Israel couldn't have done that for anyone. It's talking about spiritual liberation, blind eyes, and the one dwelling in darkness. That's how they're supposed to be a light. And this is in the larger context of God's creation of the entire universe. This is really quite a striking passage. It applied to God's old covenant people. It applies to Jesus, the perfect Israelite. And it applies to every covenant member who has Christ as their head. We've got verses 8 and 9 still to do, but we'll just pick that up next week. I think this video is long enough as it is. So thank you so much for tuning in. Any questions, comments, anything else? We'll keep doing the servant song, but just feel free to guide the videos in the future. Thank you all. Hope you're doing well. God bless.